market was alive, buzzing with the noise of street vendors calling out their goods, children laughing, and townsfolk bargaining over prices. The air was thick with the scent of freshly cooked food, the clinking of coins, and the murmur of daily life. The market was a world unto itself, where everyone had their part, from the bustling crowds to the eager eyes searching for a good deal. Billionaire Jide entered the market, his expensive shoes clacking loudly against the ground. People parted for him like the Red Sea, eyes wide with awe. Whispers spread through the crowd, their voices low but laced with a mixture of admiration and fear. Jide's face was set in a stern expression, his mind focused on the important business meeting ahead. The rest of the world seemed to fade away as he moved through the crowded square, his presence commanding the space around him. He didn't notice the people he passed, didn't hear the chatter, didn't care for anything but his own plans. In stark contrast, Araez moved with caution, a small figure trying to navigate through the chaos of the market. Her worn clothes clung to her slender frame, and the basket of fruits balanced carefully on her head seemed far too heavy for someone of her size. She moved quickly, eyes scanning the sea of people around her, trying to avoid the elbows and shoulders that jostled her as she made her way through the crowd. Each step was measured, each movement calculated, but the crowd was unforgiving. And then it happened. Without warning, Adaeze collided with Jide. The fruits in her basket scattered in all directions, rolling across the dusty ground. A loud gasp escaped her lips as she stumbled, struggling to regain her balance. Her hands reached out frantically, gathering the fallen fruits, but the chaos was too much. The crowd paused, watching in silence as the young girl scrambled to collect what she had lost. Her voice trembled as she apologized, her words barely audible over the thick tension that suddenly filled the air. Jide, already irritated by the delay, turned sharply. His eyes flashed with anger as he faced the girl who had dared to disturb his path. His face darkened, and without a second thought, his hand moved with swift, merciless force. The slap rang through the market like the crack of thunder, sending a wave of shock through the crowd. The noise of the market seemed to stop, and for a brief moment, there was nothing but silence. Adaeze stumbled backward, the sting of the slap burning across her cheek. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Her hand instinctively went to her face, pressing against the reddening skin, as she struggled to gather the scattered fruits from the ground. The silence in the air was deafening, broken only by the soft rustling of the fruits being collected. The crowd remained still, unsure of what to do. Some whispered amongst themselves, their voices full of disbelief. Others stared, wide-eyed, at the scene before them, but no one stepped forward to intervene. There was an unspoken fear in the air, a fear of speaking out against someone as powerful as Jide. Adaeze, with her tear-streaked face and humble appearance, was alone in the middle of the market, the weight of the crowd's silence pressing down on her. But Jide, too caught up in his own anger, did not notice the girl's distress. He stood there, watching as she tried to pick up the fruits with shaking hands, oblivious to the truth that she was no ordinary girl. No one in the market could have known what Jide had just set in motion. He didn't know it, but this girl, this poor, struggling child, was connected to something far bigger than his wealth and arrogance could ever comprehend. As Adaeze silently cried in the dust, Jide turned and walked away, lost in his thoughts, unaware of the storm he had just unleashed. Billionaire Jide stood atop his empire, a figure of power and ambition. His wealth, meticulously built over years, was a monument to his ruthlessness. From the moment he set foot in the business world, he had learned how to manipulate and control, using his wealth to bend others to his will. He was a man who had clawed his way to the top, stepping on anyone who dared get in his way. His name alone commanded respect. His empire stretched far and wide, reaching into industries across the city, the country, and beyond. He owned land, buildings, and people. People who either feared him or admired him for his unyielding pursuit of power. To the world, Jide was an untouchable giant. His business dealings were known to be sharp and aggressive, but no one dared speak against him. He was a man who did what needed to be done, no matter who he trampled in the process. His reputation was built on the idea that he could never be defeated. But what the public did not see was the cold, calculating man behind the facade. Jide didn't care about the struggles of the poor, the sacrifices made by those with less. To him, they were tools, resources to be used, discarded, or exploited as necessary. His ambition drove him, and it knew no bounds. He was always looking for his next big win, his next step on the ladder of success. But as high as he climbed, there was one thing he never considered: the cost of his actions. Adaeze lived a world apart from Jide's. Her life was one of struggle, but it was also full of love and quiet strength. Raised in a small home with her ailing mother, Adaeze spent every day working tirelessly to make ends meet. From dawn till dusk, she moved through the streets of the market, selling fruits to the passersby, hoping to make enough money for her mother's medicine. The weight of her mother's illness hung over her like a dark cloud, and though Adaeze did not fully understand the scope of her own potential, she had learned how to be resourceful and strong. Every day was a fight for survival, but Adaeze's heart remained kind. Despite her own hardships, she was always willing to lend a hand to those in need. She had learned from a young age that kindness was a strength, even when the world around her seemed to offer nothing but cruelty. Her mother's illness consumed all their resources, leaving Adaeze with little time for anything other than the daily grind. Yet, there was a fire within her, a determination to protect her mother, even if it meant sacrificing everything else. Though Adaeze had limited formal education, she had inherited a sharp mind. Her observations were keen, and her ability to understand the people around her made her more capable than most of her age. But Adaeze carried her intelligence quietly, hidden beneath the surface. She didn't seek recognition or praise, she sought survival, and her survival depended on one thing: ensuring that her mother received the care she needed. What Adaeze did not know was that her journey was about to collide with a force far beyond her understanding, and that this collision would set the stage for a dramatic shift in her life and the life of those around her. Jide's world, however, was governed by a cold ambition that made no room for compassion. He saw everything and everyone through the lens of profit and control. People, whether business associates or family, were tools in his hands, manipulated and shaped to fit his desires. Trust was something he demanded, not earned, and loyalty was a currency he valued only when it served his purpose. Jide was used to being in control, in charge of every situation, every conversation, every deal. His actions were calculated, his words sharp and cutting. He made enemies with ease, but his power was such that no one dared challenge him. He didn't need friends, only people who would do his bidding. But in his quest for power, Jide had overlooked one thing. The very people he thought were beneath him could sometimes surprise him. He failed to understand that those who appeared weak or insignificant could possess strength in forms he couldn't imagine. Adaeze was one such person. She wasn't a person he ever gave a second thought to, until their paths crossed by chance in the market. And with that collision, everything changed. Adaeze did not know that her life was intricately tied to the shadows of the past. Her father, a figure shrouded in mystery, had once been a powerful man, one connected to Jide in ways Adaeze could never have imagined. But her mother, in her efforts to protect her daughter from the dangers of the past, kept the truth hidden. Adaeze grew up with the questions about her father's disappearance lingering in her heart, but she never had the answers. She didn't know the man who had been a part of her life only in stories. But Adaeze would soon find herself drawn into a story much larger than the small world of market stalls and street corners she had always known. Jide, on the other hand, was blind to the forces at play. He had no idea that the girl he slapped in the market was not some ordinary poor girl. He didn't know that the anger he unleashed on her that day was not just a random act of violence, but a ripple that would soon turn into a tidal wave. Adaeze's identity, though hidden, held the key to a past that Jide had long forgotten, a past that could very well undo everything he had worked so hard to build. But in his arrogance, he saw only a poor girl, a small bump in the road, a temporary inconvenience. And so, the tension between these two worlds, the world of power and wealth, and the world of survival and struggle, was set into motion. Adaeze, unaware of her true lineage and the connections that bound her to Jide's past, was living a life of quiet strength and determination. Jide, focused solely on his ambition, failed to see the storm that was brewing right in front of him. Neither of them knew that the collision between their worlds would lead to a reckoning. Neither could escape. The incident that began with a slap would soon ignite a firestorm. Jide, in his anger, had struck Ades in public, believing his wealth and power would shield him from any consequence. However, the public's reaction was not as easily subdued. The crowd in the market was divided, and the incident quickly became the topic of gossip, debates, and public outcry. Thought about one. The crowd's divided reaction. Whispers of outrage spread like wildfire. Some townsfolk stood in defense of Ades, their voices rising with anger at the injustice they had just witnessed. "That was wrong," one woman shouted, her voice trembling. "No one deserves to be humiliated like that in front of everyone, especially not someone trying to make a living." Others murmured in agreement. Their eyes narrowed with suspicion at Jide, but none dared to speak out too loudly. The fear of his wealth and influence stifled many. On the other hand, a different segment of the crowd remained silent. Their eyes were cast downward, unwilling to meet the gaze of those who dared challenge Jide. They feared retaliation from his powerful network, knowing that anyone who crossed him could face severe consequences. The market, once full of vibrant chatter, now buzzed with tension. As word of the slap spread, local media outlets quickly picked up the story. The press had a field day, stirring emotions with headlines like "Billionaire's Public Slap, a Symbol of Power or Abuse," and "Poor Girl, Rich Man, Who Holds the Right to Justice?" The controversy sparked debates all over the city, on social media, in offices, and at dinner tables. Justice became the central theme, and Jide's name was dragged through the mud. 2. Adaise's anger and vow for justice. Meanwhile, Adaise, alone and bruised, sat on the ground where Jide had left her, her body trembling with a mix of humiliation and fury. The slap burned across her cheek, but it was not the physical sting that hurt the most. It was the pride, the dignity she felt he had stolen from her in front of so many people. As tears welled up in her eyes, her heart thumped with an unspoken promise. "I will make him pay," she whispered to herself. The anger that began to simmer deep inside her would not be quenched by time. Adaise's voice, though quiet, was filled with determination. The humiliation she had suffered would fuel her every step toward justice. When she returned home and told her mother what had happened, the response was immediate. Her mother's face twisted with fury, her hands trembling as she gripped Adaise's arm. "He slapped you? That man has no shame." But Adaise's mother, knowing all too well the consequences of angering powerful men like Jide, also knew the dangers of confronting him. "Stay away from him, Adaise. You don't understand the power he wields. He can destroy us. Please don't get involved." But Adaise's resolve only hardened. "I won't let him get away with it," she vowed, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her heart. 3. Jide's dismissal of the incident. Jide, however, was unbothered by the commotion. To him, the incident was a fleeting annoyance, a momentary glitch in his otherwise flawless existence. The public outrage did not faze him in the least. He dismissed it with a laugh, certain that nothing would come of it. "A poor girl? A slap in the market? Who cares?" he scoffed to his associates in a meeting later that week. "People will forget about it tomorrow." His focus remained solely on his business. There were bigger deals to handle, larger acquisitions to make, and new strategies to implement. Jide was a man obsessed with power, and he had no time for trivial matters such as a slap that, in his mind, meant nothing. His empire continued to grow, and to him that was the only thing that mattered. Adaise, in his mind, was just an inconsequential piece of the puzzle. She was beneath him, and thus irrelevant. Adaise's investigation begins. But Adaise's investigation into Jide's past had already begun. Driven by her anger and a sense of justice, she began to dig deeper. At first, she searched for simple answers. Who was this man who could strike her without consequence? But the more she looked, the more she uncovered. There were rumors, whispers in the dark corners of the market, and old records buried in archives, all pointing to a hidden connection between Jide and her father. What she discovered was shocking. Years ago, her father, a man once respected and feared in his own right, had mysteriously vanished. Those who knew of him, including her mother, always spoke of his disappearance with unease. But Adaise now had the pieces of the puzzle. Jide's rise to power, it seemed, had a darker origin. Her father's disappearance was not a random event, it was part of something much larger. 5. Uncovering the hidden family history. As Adais dug deeper into the files, old letters, and whispered accounts, the truth slowly began to surface. Her father had been involved with Jide long before Adais was born. There were rumors that they had been business partners once, but that a falling out had left Adais' father at odds with Jide. The more she uncovered, the more she realized the ugly truth. Her father had been erased from history, his legacy swallowed up by the growing empire Jide had built. The deeper Adais dug, the more she understood how her family's history had been erased. The connections between her father and Jide were undeniable. She found evidence of shady business dealings, a web of lies, and manipulations that had allowed Jide to seize control of what rightfully belonged to her family. 6. Adais infiltrates Jide's world. With this newfound knowledge, Adais' plan took shape. She was no longer the powerless, poor girl who had been humiliated in the market. Armed with the truth about her family's past, she began to infiltrate Jide's world. Using her intelligence and wit, she gained access to people within his inner circle, his business partners, his associates, even some of his closest friends. At first, Adais played the part of the humble, innocent woman. She charmed her way into conversations, offering kindness and insight that others found disarming. She wasn't after their money or influence. She was after their secrets. And slowly, she began to learn about Jide's weaknesses, the financial scandals he had buried, the people he had wronged, and the shady dealings that had kept his empire standing. 7. Jide's growing unease. As Adais carefully moved through Jide's world, the first signs of trouble began to appear. Jide's competitors, long envious of his success, seemed to be gaining an edge. Business deals that had once been certain now started to fall apart. Leaked information and whispers about Jide's business practices spread like wildfire. A once unshakable empire was beginning to tremble. Jide could feel the pressure mounting. Deals he had counted on were slipping through his fingers. A sense of unease began to creep into his once dominant world. Something was off. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but he knew he was being attacked from all sides. Employees started acting strange. His partners looked at him with suspicion, and his closest allies seemed to be pulling away. But Jide was unable to connect the dots. He didn't know that the humble girl he had struck in the market was the one orchestrating the unraveling of his empire. 8. The unseen hand behind Jide's struggles. In the shadows, Adais watched as the cracks in Jide's empire grew wider. Her quiet moves, strategic and well-planned, were starting to show results. The chaos in Jide's life was all her doing. She was the unseen hand behind his struggles, and he had no idea. Adais' master plan was falling into place. She wasn't just seeking revenge. She was reclaiming what was rightfully hers. Jide had underestimated her, and now his empire would crumble beneath the weight of the truth she was about to expose. Adais' strategic reveal. The gala setting. The air in the lavish ballroom of the Grand Hotel buzzed with the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. The gala was a spectacle of opulence. Gold chandeliers hung above, casting a soft glow over the distinguished guests in their evening attire. Jide stood at the center, surrounded by business magnates, politicians, and dignitaries, basking in the admiration of those around him. His smooth talk and charm kept the crowd entertained, but he was unaware of the storm brewing on the horizon. Tonight, his carefully constructed world was about to collapse. Adais' arrival. Adais entered the venue alone, her demeanor calm and composed. She was no longer the shy girl who had once been humiliated in the market. Each step she took toward Jide was deliberate, her eyes fixed on him across the room. The murmurs of the crowd grew as her presence commanded attention, and whispers spread quickly. Who was she, and what was she doing here? A bold decision. When Adais finally reached the stage, she paused. The room seemed to hold its breath as the music died down and the conversations quieted. She took the microphone in hand. The air, thick with anticipation, hung still as she began to speak. Adais was no longer the victim. Tonight, she was the woman in control. Her voice rang clear and powerful, demanding attention. 2. The shocking revelation, unveiling the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, Adais began, her voice steady. I stand before you tonight, not as a forgotten girl from the streets, but as the daughter of a man whose name you may not remember. My father, Chijioke, was a business partner to the great Jidi, a man who once helped build this empire. She paused for a moment, allowing her words to sink in before continuing. That was until Jide betrayed him and took everything. The guests exchanged uncertain glances as Adaezi's words reverberated throughout the room. She met Jide's eyes, her gaze unflinching. The betrayal didn't just cost my father his career, it cost him his life. After Jide's deceit, my father disappeared, never to be seen again. And the truth of what happened has been buried, hidden by those who feared Jide's power. Adaezi raised the microphone higher, allowing the weight of her statement to settle. The evidence. Adaz began to lay out the evidence she had painstakingly gathered over the past weeks. She produced documents that connected Jide to shady deals and financial manipulations that had taken place in the years leading up to her father's disappearance. Photos of meetings between Jide and her father, and letters showing shady business transactions, were displayed on the large screen behind her. The room fell into stunned silence as the evidence mounted, undeniable proof that Jide had played a direct role in her father's downfall. Jide's denial. Jide stood frozen, his face draining of color. For a moment, he couldn't speak. Then, in a feeble attempt to regain control, he opened his mouth, his voice shaky. "This is a lie," he stammered. "Adaez, this is nonsense. These documents, they mean nothing. You've been misled." But the guests weren't so easily fooled. The whispers grew louder, and many began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Jide's calm facade was beginning to crack. 3. The room reacts, whispers of shock. The shockwaves of Adaezi's revelation rippled through the crowd. Guests exchanged looks, and hushed whispers spread like wildfire. Those who had once admired Jide now questioned the truth of his success. Adaezi, once just a girl from the streets, now stood before them as the bearer of the truth. A truth they could no longer ignore. Power shifting. Adaezi's presence had shifted the power dynamic in the room. The tables had turned. Where she had once been invisible, now she was the center of attention. Her words had undone the very foundation of Jide's carefully crafted image. She had turned the tables, and in that moment, she was no longer the victim. She was the victor. Jide's isolation. Jide's expression twisted with panic as the reality of the situation set in. The guests who had once fawned over him now avoided his gaze, their loyalty slipping away like sand through his fingers. Some started to gather their things, eager to leave before the evening spiraled out of control. His connections, his pillars of power, were beginning to crumble. He realized, with a sinking feeling, that he was losing control. 4. Jide's desperate struggle, manipulation, and lies. Jide's desperation set in. With a nervous laugh, he tried to salvage what he could of his crumbling empire. Adaez is just a bitter woman seeking revenge, he said, trying to play off her accusations. She's been misled, and all of this is a scheme to ruin me. Don't let her poison your minds. But the crowd was no longer buying it. Jide's usual charisma had faltered, and his words seemed hollow. Adaeze stood unfazed, ready to dismantle his lies with cold precision. Adaezi's counterattack. "You think I'm lying?" Adaezi's voice rang out, sharp and unwavering. "I've shown you the proof, documents, testimonies, even witnesses who saw the betrayal with their own eyes. Jide, the truth is undeniable." With each piece of evidence she presented, Jide's defenses crumbled. He could no longer deny the truth, and the more he tried to cover up his past, the more his empire slipped from his grasp. Jide's panic. Jide's face was flushed, his hands trembling. He tried to force a smile, but it was strained and unconvincing. The realization that his carefully built world was unraveling before him was unbearable. Desperation surged as he reached for his phone, attempting to call for help, but no one answered. His empire, once unshakable, was crumbling. 5. The power shift. The collapse of an empire. News of the scandal spread beyond the gala in minutes, and Jide's world began to crumble. Investors pulled out, his business partners turned their backs, and competitors launched aggressive attacks, seizing opportunities to weaken his position. The media, which had once celebrated his rise to power, now painted him as a villain, an opportunist who had built his empire on lies and betrayal. Adaezi's victory. Adaezi stood tall amidst the chaos. Her face was calm, her eyes steady, as she watched Jide's world implode. This was not just about revenge. It was about justice. She had exposed the truth that had been buried for so long, and now she had brought the mighty Jide to his knees. She had fought for her father's name, for the justice that had long been denied to him, and she had won. 6. Jide's final attempt to regain control. A desperate plea. With his empire collapsing around him, Jide turned to Adaiz in a last-ditch effort to salvage something of his wealth and power. "I can give you anything you want," he begged. "Money, status, whatever it takes to make this go away." Adaizi's response. Adaizi shook her head, her expression unyielding. "You can't undo the damage you've done, Jide. My father is gone, and no amount of money can bring him back. The truth has been exposed, and there's nothing you can do to change it." 7. The Last Stand. Jide's realization. As the last of his supporters drifted away, Jide was left alone in the Grand Hall, his empire in ruins. The arrogance that had once protected him now felt hollow. He had built his life on lies, and now the lies were his downfall. Adaizi's calm resolve. Adaizi watched quietly as the last pieces of Jide's empire fell away. This moment wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. Adaizi had fought not only for herself, but for the truth that had been hidden for so long. With the truth now exposed, Jide had nothing left. The battle was over, and Adaizi had emerged victorious. Consequences for Jide. Jide's once unshakable empire begins to crumble. With Adaizi's revelation and the evidence she provided, he is now isolated and powerless. His vast wealth, which once seemed untouchable, begins to slip away as his business empire collapses under the weight of public disgrace and legal scrutiny. Former allies desert him, leaving him to face the full impact of his deceitful actions. 1. Jide's sudden isolation. Fading support, the fallout from Adaizi's revelation is swift. Jide's loyal business partners, once drawn to his ruthless ambition, now turn their backs on him. His calls for meetings go unanswered, and even his most trusted allies begin to avoid him. The prestigious investors who once showered him with respect now disregard his frantic attempts to repair his shattered reputation. His name, once synonymous with power, becomes associated with betrayal and scandal. Rivals close in. Jide's rivals, long waiting for a chink in his armor, now pounce. Using the information Adaizi uncovered, they seize business deals and outbid him in key contracts. They publicly denounce his leadership and expose his corruption, using the very secrets Adaizi unveiled to further erode his credibility. As his business dealings unravel, Jide finds himself facing a new, dangerous enemy in the very industry he once dominated. 2. Adaizi's empowerment, stepping into power. Adaizi, once a woman ignored and dismissed by society, now finds herself in full control of her life. Her calculated strategy has brought her justice and changed her fate. She ensures that her mother receives the best medical care, securing their future in a way she had only dreamed of before. Adaizi does not gloat in Jide's downfall, but instead looks toward building a better future, freed from the chains of her past. Seeking a new beginning, Adaizi's focus remains on her future. Rather than relishing in Jide's demise, she uses the leverage she now holds to climb the ranks in a reputable company. Her intelligence, strategic thinking, and calm demeanor make her an asset in her new role. Adaizi becomes a voice for others wronged by those in power, and she makes it her mission to create change within her community. Her past may be marred by hardship, but she now embodies the power of resilience and determination. Jide's public disgrace. The fall from grace. News of Jide's scandal spreads like wildfire. Former fans, colleagues, and business associates who once admired his ruthlessness now distance themselves from him. Social media erupts in fury as people share their disgust and disillusionment with his corruption. Jide is no longer seen as a success, but as a villain, a symbol of greed and deceit. As Jide's reputation deteriorates, journalists and media outlets dig deeper into his past. Ex-employees and former business partners come forward, providing further details of his unscrupulous actions. News stories expose his manipulation, his lies, and his ruthless pursuit of wealth at the expense of others. The truth, once hidden, now floods the media, and Jide's name becomes synonymous with betrayal. Legal consequences for Jide. Legal action. The legal consequences of Jide's actions begin to catch up with him. Investigations are launched, and Adaizi's evidence plays a pivotal role in building the case against him. Authorities uncover years of illegal dealings, fraud, and corruption. Jide, once untouchable, now faces the full force of the law. The verdict. In court, Gidi is found guilty on multiple charges, ranging from fraud to illegal business practices. His wealth and assets are swiftly seized by the state, and he is ordered to pay reparations to those he wronged, including Adais and her family. The swift punishment sends a clear message: no one, no matter how powerful, is beyond accountability. 5. Adai's journey to justice. No malice, just justice. Adai's victory is not fueled by hatred or bitterness. While her actions were a direct response to the wrongs done to her and her family, her pursuit of justice is driven by a deep need to right the wrongs of the past. She seeks not revenge, but a sense of balance and fairness that was denied to her father. Adais has reclaimed control over her life, not by destroying Gide out of spite, but by demanding the truth be acknowledged. A bright future ahead. As Adais watches the consequences unfold, she remains focused on her own path. With her newfound resources, she begins to build a career and a future for herself. She doesn't forget where she came from, but she knows her future is full of promise. Adaizi also begins to work closely with community leaders to support others who have been wronged, offering a platform for the unheard and the oppressed. Her journey is far from over, but she walks it with the strength of someone who has already won. 6. The final blow to Gide's reputation. Public humiliation. The final blow to Gide's reputation comes at a major business conference, where he had been scheduled to speak as an influential industry leader. An old associate, who had long kept quiet about Gide's involvement in the disappearance of Adaizi's father, takes the opportunity to expose the full extent of his betrayal. The revelation sends shockwaves through the industry, leaving Gide humiliated in front of the very people who once revered him. His name is forever tarnished. Gide's last attempt. In a desperate attempt to salvage his reputation, Gide offers a public apology. But his words ring hollow. There is no sincerity in his voice, only panic. His apologies are met with contempt, and no one believes his claims. His effort to reclaim the public's trust is futile, and his downfall becomes inevitable. 7. Adaizi's final moment of triumph. The turning of the tables. With Gide's empire shattered, Adaizi stands at the precipice of her own transformation. She reflects on the journey that has brought her here, from the woman she once was to the powerful figure she has become. Adaizi is no longer the victim of circumstance. She is the one who has triumphed through resilience, intelligence, and an unwavering sense of justice. Returning home to her mother, Adaizi watches as their lives change for the better. Her mother's health improves, and the weight of their struggles is lifted. The shadows of their past have been cleared, and Adaizi stands ready to face a new chapter filled with opportunities. 8. The broader impact. Inspiration for others. Adaizi's story reverberates throughout the community. She becomes an inspiration to those who have been oppressed, wronged, or overlooked. She is no longer seen as a victim of circumstances, but as a living example of what it means to fight for justice. Adaizi's strength and perseverance inspire others to stand up against corruption, injustice, and inequality. A lesson learned. The story closes with a reflection on the importance of justice, perseverance, and the idea that no one is invincible. Adaizi's journey proves that even the most powerful figures can fall when the truth is revealed. Her triumph is a reminder that justice is not about revenge, but about righting the wrongs of the past and ensuring that those in power are held accountable. Adaizi's story is not just her own. It is a powerful lesson for everyone who has ever been silenced or wronged. The final lesson. The story of Adaizi's journey is a powerful reminder of the unpredictable consequences of betrayal, the transformative power of resilience, and the deeper meaning of justice and strength. Through her struggles and eventual triumph, the narrative offers lessons that speak not just to the individuals involved, but to everyone who has ever felt powerless in the face of adversity. Adaizi's path to victory is a reflection of how, in the end, true power lies not in wealth or status, but in the ability to rise above hardship and fight for what is right. Betrayal and its unforeseen consequences, the weight of deception. At the heart of the story is the destructive power of betrayal. Gide's calculated decision to betray Adaizi's father, driven by his greed and desire for power, sets in motion a series of events he never could have anticipated. His arrogance and belief that he could manipulate everyone around him cloud his judgment. He underestimates Adaiz, thinking that her humble background and apparent vulnerability make her insignificant. But it is precisely this underestimation that leads to his downfall. The lesson is clear. Betrayal, no matter how well thought out it may seem, often carries unforeseen consequences. No one should be dismissed based on their social status, appearance, or past. Underestimating the less fortunate, Gidi's greatest mistake was assuming that Adaiz, because of her poor background, had no power to fight back. Her strength, hidden beneath her quiet demeanor, becomes the very force that dismantles everything he built. This is a crucial lesson. Never underestimate someone based on their circumstances. Even those who appear weak or powerless may possess the resilience, intelligence, and determination to change the course of their fate. 2. Justice and its unpredictable forms. The unexpected path to justice. Adaiz's journey illustrates how justice does not always unfold in the way we expect. Instead of seeking violent revenge or resorting to force, she uses her intelligence, resilience, and moral clarity to expose the truth. Her justice is one that is earned through patience and strategy, showing that sometimes the greatest victories come not from brute force, but from persistence and clear thinking. Adaiz's story teaches us that justice often appears in unexpected forms, and the most effective way to achieve it is through integrity and determination. Retribution's inevitable arrival. Gidi's fall is not the result of a single vengeful act, but the inevitable consequence of his own actions. Adaiz does not need to seek revenge. Gidi's own greed and cruelty bring him to his ruin. This is a reminder that those who exploit and harm others will eventually face retribution, often in ways they cannot predict or control. The story teaches that the consequences of one's actions are inescapable, no matter how powerful they may seem. 3. Power dynamics and the true meaning of strength. Questioning power and privilege. The narrative challenges traditional views of power and privilege. Jide, with all his wealth and status, is initially seen as the embodiment of power. Yet, it is Adai, who has none of these advantages, who ultimately shifts the power dynamic. Through her courage, intelligence, and unwavering belief in justice, she proves that true strength is not about money or status, but about inner resilience and the capacity to act with integrity. Adaiz's story shows that true power is not tied to wealth or control over others, but to the strength of one's character and the ability to stand firm in the face of adversity. Resilience as true power. While Jide relied on his influence and wealth, Adaiz's true power lies in her resilience. She does not seek to dominate others. Instead, she learns to master herself and navigate the challenges life throws at her. Her journey teaches us that true power comes from within, from the ability to overcome obstacles and rise above the circumstances that seek to hold us down. 4. The resolution. Forgiveness and wisdom. Choosing forgiveness, not revenge. At the end of her journey, Adaiz chooses to forgive Jide, but her forgiveness is not born from weakness or a desire to forget. It is a conscious decision to free herself from the burden of hatred, to let go of the anger that could otherwise consume her. Forgiveness, for Adaizi, is an act of strength. It allows her to move forward, unburdened by the past. Her forgiveness teaches that while revenge may offer a temporary sense of satisfaction, it is only through letting go of bitterness that we can truly find peace. Adaizi's greatest lesson is that true power lies not in wealth or domination, but in self-respect and the courage to act with integrity. She chooses to walk away from the conflict with wisdom, knowing that her strength comes from the choices she makes, not from the things she owns. The story teaches that the most significant victory is not in defeating others, but in mastering oneself and standing firm for what is right. Sara 5. The broader lesson, resilience in the face of adversity. A message of hope. Adaiz's journey is a message of hope to all those who face adversity, no matter how insurmountable it may seem. Her story shows that resilience, intelligence, and the willingness to fight for justice can turn the tide in even the most hopeless of situations. Adaize proves that no matter how small or powerless one may feel, the ability to rise above and take control of one's destiny is the ultimate form of strength. The power of one. In the end, Adaize's triumph highlights the power of the individual to affect change. Her story reminds us that no matter our social standing or the challenges we face, we all have the potential to make a difference. One person's determination can dismantle even the most powerful of forces, and Adaize's journey serves as an enduring testament to the strength of the human spirit.